Welcome to Side by Side, a podcast where I, Robert Kuang, take you inside conversations with artists, creatives, healers, and warriors taking the charge in their transformational story. Today's guests are Lauren Borden and Katherine Folk-Sullivan. By merging their expertise in coaching, leadership training, and intuitive energy work, they are the co-founders of Whole Human Coaching, an intuitive mashup of mentor coaching, skills training, and mastermind groups. In this conversation, we dive inside Lauren and Katherine's experiences as coaches and facilitators. We look at some of the biggest blocks and challenges coaches face beyond being sufficiently trained, and we discuss ways we can embrace collective effort over rugged individualism. You can find more side-by-side conversations at sidebysidepodcast.podbean.com. If you'd like to connect with me about my services, please visit www.robertquanhome.com. Shouting in the background.
I can't hear it.
Yeah, Robert is like perfect.
I can't hear it at all.
We can't hear it at all.
Okay. Well, hopefully there's actually people outside. That's a joke. That's a joke.
Not just people inside.
That is the start of our conversation. No, in all seriousness, I'm here with Lauren and Katherine. Maybe just to give a little context, Lauren and Katherine were generous enough to offer me a space in their development program for coaches and personal development. I have also known them separately through coaching and through the world of coaching. This has been kind of like in the works for a minute, but I was always like, after that container completed, I was sort of like, I would love to chat with you both in another way and kind of like dive into your work and your brilliance. So first of all, thank you for being here today and for us to be able to like find this time to connect. Yeah.
Thanks so much for having us, Robert.
I actually don't know how you two met, even though I know it's through the world of coaching, but I kind of wanted to hear a little bit about how you entered the world of personal development and coaching, and what was it like when you first met each other?
Well, we met at Accomplishment Coaching, and I think the first time we spoke, my memory is that Lauren complimented me on my earrings at lunch, and so she was in my heart forever from then on.
That's how I make friends. I'm like,
That's
I
how
want to
girls
be
make
friends with that
friends.
person. So I like compliment something they're wearing, or I think they were really sincerely cute. Like that wasn't made up, but yeah, it was because I also wanted to be friends with you. So
Were you meeting as participants?
So Katherine was a leader in training, or were on the leadership team, and we were all at a group lunch. I was just finishing my coach training program, and Robert, you missed this era of my world where it was like right before I graduated, and I was just on the brink of leaving my job to start my coaching practice. And I sat down with this like ethereal, lovely, like warm hug of a human. And this is my memory of it. Katherine's like, how's it going? And I was like, like I was like completely freaking out. And Katherine, I don't even know if you remember this conversation. I think I've mentioned this to you a couple of times, but you have just had the most calming presence and the most just like delightful, easeful take on like what it meant to be a coach and run a business and be a business owner. And I remember finding that conversation very comforting. I was like, oh, right. Yeah. Everything's like going to be fine. And then it was a couple years, like we didn't really connect again after that until we ended up in the C-Suite Collective together. And that's been really when our friendship has deepened quite a bit, which I've been really grateful for. So that's my memory of it. Does that match, Katherine? Like, am I thinking of the same scenario that you're thinking of?
I think so. I don't really remember the conversation. And I love hearing that reflection about me because the truth is I am, and I think always am, a duck, right? It like looks very serene and placid on the surface, but underneath it's like furiously paddling.
I was like, did she say a duck?
She did.
I was like, oh my God.
A duck. It's the way my trauma manifests, right? It's like inside there might be turmoil, but on the outside I can create peace in the space
real
around
power,
me.
though.
Yeah, so it's I leverage it as a great skill in coaching, and it's funny, we didn't know each other very well. We just sort of interacted in this professional setting, and my
Yeah.
experience of Lauren was very smart, very together, very corporate person. Like that's how I knew you and the reputation that you had,
Mm.
and then coming back into connection with you now through the C-Suite Collective and discovering that you are a witch hippie woo California chick. And that I'm like the conventional one in our relationship.
You are. You're the conventional one in the relationship.
Yes.
I thought you were going to say, like, I figured out it was just, I sleep on a bed of lies. Like, it was not. I'm like, I can present very corporate. Like, I can meet people there, but like, I'm, catch me on a casual Saturday or like full moon and I'm, dancing in my backyard and like howling to the moon. So just,
Yeah.
the usual.
My thing will be like know all the technical vocabulary, but then I need my moment to like cry to music or something. You know what I mean? It's just like I'm sure people will be like, wow, it's like two different people or something, but aren't we all a little bit multifaceted? But yeah, so you both met in the world of personal development. Having known you both in some capacity for a number of years doing this, what's been your experience like, and what's been the biggest surprise working with people as a coach and facilitating workshops and meeting people where they are and all of it?
The biggest surprise for me is discovering how good I am at it. And I think this is why I was so intimidated by Lauren's professional corporate has it together image. I came from the arts, so I was an actor in New
Yeah.
York. And looking back now, I realize I was drawn to that profession because I really think there's two places where we allow spirit to exist in our culture, and one is coaching and the other is the arts. And I didn't know coaching existed, so I went into the arts, and that was where it was not just allowed, but where the whole work was about being connected to yourself and other people and to
Yeah.
spirit.
Yeah.
And to be in that profession and really absorbing the cultural message that it's not valuable. So the way that we treat the arts in this country, it is so devalued monetarily and socially, and it keeps getting pushed more and more to the margins. And so then coming into coaching, and it was like this huge relief to find a profession that was like, oh, I can stay connected to myself and to other people and do something that it like feels in my heart like it matters, and people will pay me for that. I still like, what, over and over again. So the big surprise, like, oh, finding what I'm really good at can overlap with what is really valuable for other people. That's been the biggest surprise.
Yeah. It's so good to own it. I don't know if I'm fully owning it, but it's really good to kind of see people in their journey to that. And maybe if there's no like final destination in all of it, but
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a moment to moment practice. There's still, I get to the end of the day, like, I'm a terrible coach. I still do
I'm
that.
a duck again.
BS all the time. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
What about you, Lauren?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's such a beautiful take also on the arts and what really just what's present there and like the integration of that with coaching. Katherine, thank you for that. For me, mine was similar. My journey, my older brother, 7 years older than me, who was kind of like a third parent to me, was a coach and was in a lot of different coaching communities. And so I met a lot of coaches at a very young age through him. And
okay.
The concept I had of coaching at that time in my life was very yang, action oriented, kind of this, like I had this idea of coaching where it's like, it's actually about having your shit together, like as a human. And like, it's this kind of the Tony Robbins thing that kind of exists in the world that I know is tremendously valuable to a lot of people, but it felt a little bit like the impact of witnessing that brand of coaching on me was that when I entered into the coaching world, I really sincerely expected as a human, I was going to need to then like perform that role of coach. I was going to need to really step into that level of performance, excellence is perfectionism, kind of like high energy thing that exists in the world. And my surprise was really like, actually the moments in our work as coaches that are the most impactful and profound, like that leave people fundamentally changed, are the ones where I as a coach am fully connected to my heart and my client is fully connected to theirs. And it's just tremendous permission to allow to flow through what needs to flow through. And it's a place of connection and intuition. And it's like this sort of intangible spiritual work that is actually the thing that makes the difference above and beyond kind of the like all of the elements of kind of performance that we see out in the world. And that for me, like actually actively divesting from that and saying, that's beautiful for some folks, but that's not how I'm going to run. Like, I'm actually not going to show up in the world that way anymore. And I'm actually not going to attempt to contort myself to that, was the moment that my business exploded. And that was bizarre to me because like everyone I had seen up until that point, it felt very like the coaching was punchy. It was kind of like getting punched in the face. It was like getting dunked on. It was this very different model than what I had seen. And like, actually, it sounds like kind of one of the themes that was present for both of us was this, like, the more ease that you allow, more of that resonance, that alignment with yourself is the thing that like magnetizes and is such a catalyst for change.
I'll speak for myself. I think definitely I've seen before I explored coaching and hired a coach, like I thought of coaching almost like a little bit militant. Yes, there's a business aspect, but almost like the discipline aspect of it. And I have seen some of that in the arts as well. Sometimes really young artists and singers are kind of go through like a very similar training, for example, in Korea, that's actually built and modeled off of the military training. So there is something to be said about how much that style, which is useful in some situations, let's be honest, is like kind of very spread. And I did see coaching as that, and it's taking me a while to be like, oh, it's not a fixed role, it's not a fixed point of being coach. And I think that's why it attracts so many people, because there's a little bit of self-determination there, right? Like you both coach, but you have your own approaches, maybe slightly different ways of seeing things, and you also collaborate together. I wanted to ask, how do you make that work, knowing I have my own approach, my own values, top values, and then everybody might do it a little differently?
I mean, I think of it, you mentioned classical music, and to me,
Yeah.
it is such a great analogy for coaching. So, learning technique and the skills of the art or of coaching is essential, right? And having a deep respect for the putting in your reps and the discipline, and in coaching the core competencies. And technique is not music. So, can we really respect the talent and artistry and unique spirit and divinity of the individual? That to me is what coaching is about, is actually making room for that. And I think we forget it sometimes in our training, right? Because in the beginning, the technique is all we know. And we really lean into the technique, which is so important. But then can we actually have the technique be in service to the music rather than the other way around?
So I'm not a musician, but like all my favorite people in the world are.
You're
And
around a lot of music.
I'm around a lot of music, and I've had the privilege of watching folks like practice a lot or like learn a new skill. And I feel like, Katherine, what you just made me think of is like, I think this is a phenomenon that Liz Gilbert talks about, though I could be wrong, where it's like that discipline is about being able to create enough mastery such that you, like, if you're learning guitar, like you can strum, you know how to like hit the different chords and like adjust your hands and your fingers on the frets on the guitar, such that it becomes like kind of ingrained and embodied enough so that when inspiration hits, like when spirit kind of taps you on the shoulder, your skills are sufficient to be able to catch what moves through you. And as coaches, right, there's this inflection point where it's like, okay, like the reps of the skills will no longer take you to like, are no longer sufficient into taking you into a place of like genius music, right? Like it's actually a matter of getting out of the way. I have a dear friend who did some work with a like locally famous jazz singer who like would do these unbelievable performances. And she would like look at her, and that she had this like Southern accent, and she'd say, I practice just enough so that when I get on stage, I can get out of the way and let God move through me.
Mm-hmm. And technique helps with that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Technique does help with that. I will say, as a musician, Katherine, as an actor, I've taken some acting classes. It's helpful, you can kind of tell when performance is happening, like in people's voices. I think it's very useful. But in any case, a lot of that, as much as sometimes it was very awkward, some of the acting exercises, but it's kind of like preparing your body a little bit, right? To be able to handle finding the note on stage or whatever is going on. But then also it's kind of for your spirit as well. But then, like Katherine said, and you both reflected this, that the technique is meant to get to where you want to be. The technique is not the whole offering of what you're capable of as a coach. Even though I still remember some of the acronyms. They come in handy every once in a while. But I don't want to suddenly put that on top of every conversation, like that is actually the priority before I've even listened to what's going on with the client, right? So just wanted to put that out there as like the marriage of technique and the other stuff.
Yes, well, and even in coaching, we call them tools, right? So the idea with a tool is, as a skilled craftsman, you know what tool to use in what situation, and you can use the tool skillfully. So absolutely, I still use the acronyms.
Well, so this makes me want to ask you about Whole Human, which is sort of the collaborative experience that you both put together. Obviously, I was there, so I know a little bit about it. But what made you decide to collaborate? What were some of the curiosities that you wanted to explore together based on your experience and your values and all of that?
It was very human design-y. I don't know, Robert, I think when maybe you and I recorded our podcast, we might have talked about human design a little bit, but like I'm a manifester and Katherine is a manifesting generator. And it was very synchronous with that, where I have this distinct memory. I'd gotten a hit. I was like, I kind of miss like training coaches. Like I miss working with coaches and training like the folks who are in the deep end of the pool when it comes to like working on themselves and making a difference in the world. And like coaches are delightful to work with. And I remember I was like scrambling eggs in my oven, and Katherine and I voice memo back and forth, and I'd send her a voice memo, and I was like, would you ever think about doing like a coach training kind of like coach container? Like, I don't even think I had language to describe what Whole Human coaching ended up being, but I was like, do you wanna, and Katherine at the time was like, nah. And you were sort of like, I don't know about that. And then it was like a couple weeks passed. And then Katherine, like after sitting with her emotional wave and kind of like allowing things to cycle through, ended up reaching back out and was like, actually, like, let's talk about this. We just ended up getting together, and I don't remember what happened after that, or like I feel like the concept, Katherine, was really yours. Like that, the concept was really something that came through you after that.
Okay, so if I backed up a little bit and told the whole story. So the way that I've done a lot of training of coaching. So I did that at Accomplishment Coaching. Then when I left that program, I was still doing a lot of mentor coaching as part of my process. And I love coaching and the techniques of coaching. And I have a very intellectual approach to life. It's how I understand, and it's what I get excited and enthusiastic about. And when I was mentoring coaches, something I kept running up against with people was people understood the core competencies. They knew how to, quote unquote, coach correctly. And they were so limited by performance anxiety. It was like people were frozen. They could not be with the client in a deep way. They could not really be present because they were so limited by trying to perform and do it right. So I sort of despaired, right? Like, how many times can you tell someone to relax? Like, just relax, right? It doesn't work very well. And at the same time, I was starting to do a lot of anti-racism work and a lot of trauma-informed work. And so I was really expanding my aperture, or what I was learning about. what I was discovering is, all of these quote unquote woo woo practices that a lot of my training really trained me out of, or discouraged me from going down that road. Discovering that a lot of those practices were actually really effective for healing and for engaging with life. And a lot of them were things that, science was like, we don't really understand why this works, but it works. Like we can see the impact of it. So I was really curious about just varying my approach as a coach and becoming more effective and impactful with people. And then I was doing a lot of my own healing work, and starting, plant medicine or meditation or visualization things. And so really starting to expand my own practice. And I was having this experience where it was like, I think I still, the technique of coaching, I had integrated so much of the skills and training deeply so that I was having this experience, like Lauren said, where I could then all of a sudden put aside my training, and it was like God was flowing through me in sessions. So I was hearing messages and like the exact right thing to say. It was like someone was whispering in my ear what to say, and it kind of freaked me out. So for me, Lauren was like, she had already done a lot of this work. So she was sort of my mentor in a lot of these areas. Like sort of all of these things started coming together, and she'd planted in my ear, we should do a coach training. And I don't know, it just all went into the bubbling pot on the back of the stove in my brain. And I lay down and took a nap, and I woke up and I just wrote out the whole sales page for the program. And that's when I called Lauren. I said, let's talk about this. And I sent it to you. What do you think? And you just wrote the curriculum and sent it back.
It was literally like we sat down. And also like, Robert, you need to understand this. I have probably 15 like courses or training programs or groups that are in my brain that I have written and rewritten, and like this sales page and that sales page that have never moved because it's like the timing hasn't been right and resistance and la la la. This, we literally sat down and we wrote the curriculum in probably 20 minutes. It was like we knew exactly what months we were going to, it was like it just all completely flowed through. And also discovered, I think, this really cool like puzzle piece thing that was happening where Katherine, I think because of your path, like Katherine is, for those who don't know Katherine, like Katherine, you are so committed to the mastery of coaching, the craft of coaching, and have such an eye for being able to support people in really stepping into their brilliance as coach. And for me, like a lot of my practice had shown up as I'd spent time in that world. And then I went way woo and was like teaching channeling and like learning internal family systems and like using hypnosis and guided visualization to help support people and like dislodging limiting beliefs that were stuck in like certain parts of their body. Yeah. Like just a lot of the modalities that Katherine's speaking to, like I went in on them in a very direct way. And so by the time we sat down to look at it, it was like, oh, all of the there's so many modalities that aren't coaching that support coaches in getting out of the way that I have this skill set in. And then like Katherine is this masterful coach trainer that can hold space in a different way and also speak to like the scientific aspects, the intellectual aspects that a lot of folks feel like they need before they can see the value in, say, intuition or embodiment work in their practice. And so it was like so fast. It was the fastest thing I think I have ever put together because it just like flowed right through.
Isn't that funny how that happens sometimes? You'd be like having like, I know this is a good idea on paper. Like it makes sense business-wise, personally. And then just for whatever reason, it just seems so much more difficult than it ought to be. And then sometimes, I mean, it's like trusting the universe in the timing, which I'm not good at, where they're like, maybe not right now, but that may be in your best interest anyway. And I'm like, no, I don't trust it.
Yeah.
And then this one just sort of happened. And I remember, speaking with both of you and how much fuel there was, I guess is the best way I would describe it. And of course, the subject matter and the themes really resonate with someone like me, who's like, I like to say I'm like somewhere in the middle, hopefully, between like the technique and the business and the woo woo and the healing aspects. So it was such a great experience for me, I will say, first of all. And I tend to always know that because when I'm in an environment that is in alignment with me, things also happen very quickly in my life. And isn't that funny how that kind of reverberates off into the participants as well? Because I think that how it started was also similar in that way. So I just wanted to say that because during that time, I developed a lot. I started doing my own group, and a lot of it was kind of seeing how things came together organically, I think, for the both of you. So I just wanted to put that out there. But we talked about some skills, things to practice that are sometimes difficult, or maybe was leaning into, oh, wow, that's way in the woo-woo world and not in the world of coaching, something like that. But aside from all of that, just for you personally, what are some skills that to you are often like overlooked or deprioritized or was kind of difficult to train or pin down, maybe even inside of the typical coaching training, let's say?
I have a lot of thoughts on this. Katherine, what are you thinking over there?
She's going to go off.
Sure, I'll start big picture. I think the biggest challenge for myself personally and what I witness in others is how deeply entrenched we all are in this culture in individualism. And so stepping into a collective relational way of being, and by relational, I mean in relationship with others and in relationship with spirit or the universe, that is so outside of the way I grew up or what I was trained or educated in.
Mm.
And so we talk about these terms like surrendering or trusting, or like in a coaching session, the magic of whatever is happening relationally between you and the client. There's like a third thing that emerges, or letting spirit work through you. It is impossible to tell someone about that, right? It's like trying to describe, I don't know, music to someone who can't hear, or art to someone who can't see, right? And it is something that you don't understand until you have a felt experience of it. And to
Yeah.
me, coaching is sort of a weird, capitalism's weird version of actually stepping into the gifts of a relational culture or being in relationship with each other. That's like my whole that's my recent obsession, is transactional versus relational culture. And I'm like, oh, I found the answer. If only we could be relational with each other, right? We walk around thinking, oh, it's you versus me, like everywhere, right? If you look at our country, that's what we're all walking around inside of. And if we could really relate to it as us, like this is ours, to me, that is the biggest challenge.
What a truth bomb inside your container. You talked about love and as an ethic, and then now you're talking about relational culture. You just drop truth bombs every once in a while, just like that.
Well, they're the same thing, right? Like love as an ethic, actually deciding that love works, that love is the thing that matters, that we could all actually work together. It's not necessarily a rational or reasonable position to take in the world, right? There's plenty of evidence against it. It is stepping into a whole different logic for how the world can work.
So what about you, Lauren? Things that you felt like you had to really like prioritize for yourself, or maybe there was a gap sometimes, things that can be tricky to actually practice and cultivate.
So funny. It's like I had a million thoughts, and then when Katherine said that, I was like, "Oh yeah, that just summed up everything." Like it's
That's what I'm saying. It's the answer. Everything fits inside of that.
Now memorize that. Yeah.
Right? Or for the sake of answering the question, though, and giving voice to the thing I see, the two pieces for me around actually the thing, Katherine, you said, you're like, there's this paradigm of like me versus you everywhere that I noticed. I was guilty of this, and I also see it in the world, right? Where self-development becomes about me, like me versus me. Like it actually we take that paradigm and we turn it inward.
Mm. Mm.
And the self-awareness piece, like there's this piece of coaching that can be like looking at all parts of you and your shadow, and like the gnarly bits and the beautiful bits and the parts that are like we are these multifaceted, complex creatures. And in the process of sometimes like transformation or like making those adjustments, we can weaponize the work against ourselves. I weaponized the work against myself for a long time, for sure. For me, one of the pieces that felt really important, like in my own journey and in the kind of healing that was necessary to be able to hold people through this work in a way that was like powerful and empowering, was around like, for me, really learning to fully trust myself, learning to like listen to my intuition, learning to kind of like that a lot of those things that I would see and want to fix in myself were not to be fixed, but they were actually to be like learned from and revered, and like actually derive wisdom from them, and like be in relationship with. And that felt really important. It's like really from this perspective, like who internal family systems,
Dick Schwartz.
Dick Schwartz, like Dick Schwartz's idea, right, of like all parts of you are really, really welcome. And can you trust yourself so radically that you can trust what's showing up in your world right now? And so that relational paradigm that Katherine, that you're speaking to, like really applying it inward as well.
Yes.
To everything that shows up in your life and reality. Like, can you have that much love for yourself as a baseline?
I think that was like the hack or the trick that opened up my coaching for me. So I think I did mostly access it originally through Dick Schwartz's work, but having that approach of all of this belongs, even the parts I don't like. So can I relate to myself that way? Can I relate to the world that way? I'm really struggling with the world right now. It's like there's so much going on in the world that I'm like, it just would be better if that wasn't happening. So that's a breakdown for me, right? My commitment is really to being and welcoming all of it, even the things that are beyond my understanding. It's just really hard right now. But that really shifted my coaching when I started relating to clients that way. Clients come with all this stuff that they think shouldn't be or they wish wasn't so, and especially things about themselves that they don't like, and bringing the context of this belongs, this should be here. We don't know what the wisdom is in it yet, but that part of you belongs just as much as every other part of you. So having an integrative approach to that, it shifted everything for me.
I guess I'll share, what I hear in all of this is just like the me versus everybody else, or me versus me. And that does show up, by the way, in the more kind of militant style of training, because that's what you're being graded against. And it's conditioned us so much that it is hard not to get out of like the combativeness. Everything's a fight. And you just made me realize, in addition to some things that we tend to do, like avoidance or denial, I definitely, you kind of made me realize there's definitely a subset of people who can use sometimes personal development. It's like a thing to fight yourself with. You know what I mean? It's like fight energy. Maybe there are some possibilities there, but what I hear in all of that is that can be limiting after a while, and people have been desiring just additional perspectives, additional ways of being with each other and being with yourself. Can we improve our quality of life without having to just decide which parts of us are bad? Right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and going back to your first question, right? What is the most surprising thing? This to me is one of the most surprising things, is that an accepting, non-aggressive stance to myself and to the world actually works better, right? I have better results in my life and in my business from that way of operating and being, both because it's more sustainable, right? There's a positive feedback loop that starts to happen, right? It's actually energizing and sourcing to me to relate to myself and the world that way. But I also just get better results. I'm way more effective. So clients will fight me on it all the time, right? Like I'm always like, what is the most compassionate? This is my question that I've been asking a lot lately, is what's the most compassionate interpretation of that when they're talking about themselves? And everybody is like, well, I can't be compassionate to myself because then, I don't know, I'll eat ice cream all day and like disintegrate, right? I won't be able to keep everything together anymore. But both from my own experience of myself, my experience with my clients, and also the evidence all shows that people who are more compassionate to themselves are more resilient, more competent, able to handle feedback and criticism, have better relationships.
And not just that, but like the reverse. So shame-based motivational strategies. So anytime you're trying to shame yourself into change, if it 9 out of 10 times it doesn't actually work, or if it does, there will be a really strong rebound. So it'll rubber band.
Yeah, if anyone's tried to change their habits, you'll be familiar with that. Does not work. Just the outcome of shame, it's not long lasting. Well, having worked on some of the skills that you were talking about in the spaces to explore, some of what you brought up in Whole Human include things like attunement, resonance, clarity, and like being in flow. These are just some things that I remember. But just overall, what are your connection to these ideas, and what are some ways that you found we can apply them? We're saying like, I feel like there's a lack of resonance with this proposal.
Mm-hmm. I'm pausing because Katherine explains resonance so beautifully, but I'll absolutely take a stab at this, which is really like, so resonance, for anyone who's listening, resonance is really this concept that trust is born in relationships out of being present, attuned, and allowing yourself to feel and be felt by others. And so if you've had this experience before, like you're in a resonant space, you're in a resonant relationship or interaction where it's like, I feel this person and am felt by them. And there's kind of this like organism that feels larger than just yourself as a consequence of these states. And they've done like brain imaging studies, and like there's actually like a field and sort of an energetic imprint of this way of being, and there's also an embodied experience of it that we as humans get to have. For me, also the implications of that comes from, is it Dan Siegel's work, Katherine? Do I have that right? It comes from Dan Siegel's work and Peter Levine's work. For me, the implications of that are so profound, because it's actually like, what would we be like if we actually could feel each other, like in our bodies? How would we be as humans? How would we be as coaches? How would we move through the world, right? In terms of actual tools, right, for being able to drop into resonance, I can speak for myself specifically, like, because this was not something that came easily to me. I'm like a heady, I can be very, very like heady and very like disembodied naturally. Like that's where a lot of my kind of trauma lies. The actual practices of embodiment, like drawing my attention down into my body and like breathing in a certain way, and nervous system regulation were really key in being able to create resonant spaces and also feel resonance with other people. Because if you're not in your body, you can't actually tell if something's resonant or not. In fact, I think one might argue that it's like, you can't actually create it. I don't know. I won't go that far because I don't know that. But like my sense is that you actually can't tell. You're not actually available for that level of connection if you're really in your head. So doing those embodied practices, like really like meditation can be one of them. Brain spotting can be another one. Katherine and I teach a little bit of work inside of Whole Human coaching that's really around embodiment, and it uses some like self-hypnosis to actually help you drop in and learning to like be with all of the sensations that are in your body, some of which are like yummy and delicious, and some of which make us want to pop out and be like, oh, I don't like that feeling. I'd rather like scroll my phone or whatever. And just like, can we start just increasing that threshold to be with and notice what you can and cannot be with inside of your body? And so for me, like in a really tangible way, what it looks like is literally like redirecting my attention down into my body. Like, where am I holding my attention? And also with my clients, asking questions like, where are you in your body right now?
Yeah.
Are you, like, are you breathing? Like some of these really basic things that kind of pull our attention back down, because also the way that we're educated encourages us to jump up here. Our
Mm-hmm.
world really encourages, like it values the intellect and kind of can step over the body. And so rebuilding those habit patterns is really, really important.
Yeah, it's like part of your before and after care, right? Things like meditation. I know we've talked about that for coaches. When at times coaching conversations can be quite intense, right? And it's good to get into there with as much grounding and neutrality as possible. But something like a meditation before and after can make a whole world of difference.
And even not just as a way, I mean, something like meditation, right? So important to be connected to yourself. But what I think is so fascinating is something like doing a meditative practice or being connected to yourself is like going to the gym and strengthening your relational muscles. This Dan Siegel tool, right? He teaches this for clinicians: presence, attunement, resonance, and that's how you create a trusting relationship. He loves acronyms, so PART is the acronym. And I learned this when I was doing trauma-informed training. And as I was learning it, it was like, all I have to do is be with people. So I think like as soon as we hear something like the word trauma, it's like, oh, okay, how do I do this skillfully, or how do I not hurt this person? And discovering that, oh, the most powerful thing you can do with somebody is be with them. And that we actually evolved to be in relationship with each other. We evolved to be deeply connected. We evolved to resonate with each other. That's how we learned how to work in groups with each other. So it's really essential for our survival. And again, this is sort of my perspective on it, right? But we've been so highly trained, right? What you were talking about, Lauren, to be in our intellect, but also to be in the individual. We are so trained to actually disconnect from each other and be in my own little bubble. And so as a coach, starting to re-enter and reintegrate these natural gifts that we have, right? My system is actually designed to resonate with your system. And that can feel really scary in the beginning, right? It's like, so for me, when I started hearing messages, or like, it's like I could hear my client's thoughts, it's like, totally freaky, right? And starting to understand, oh, that's actually how my system is designed to work with yours. My brain evolved to be able to mirror your brain and to deeply understand you and your motivations. And so can I both start to reintegrate those skills and talents and learn to moderate or regulate them on purpose, right? Can I actually become more porous on purpose? And then can I reestablish my boundary and become less porous on purpose? Can I actually like get some control, some technique around that talent? Mm-hmm. And, for me, why I thought that was so important for coaches is knowing all these coaches who were so brilliant and so well trained and were so shut down in coaching conversations, right? It's like, you got to be with the client. So can you just relax for a minute and really be present with this other person? And really understanding that to ask to be present actually requires a great deal of spiritual and emotional fitness. You have to actually be willing to be vulnerable, undefended.
Yeah, I had two thoughts come up around this. One is like, well, this is a question actually to both of you. Would you say practicing these skills or these ideas and integrating them has helped you become more trauma informed in your work?
Yes, okay. 100%.
Why so?
Well, so I always had been hired by people who had attachment trauma or big stuff in their past. Those people just would say, oh, I feel safe with you. So starting to understand, oh, there's something I'm like clients are regulating with me, right? My nervous system, this thing where I can show up and be, serenity and peace with people, they're actually using that to help regulate their own system. So just understanding, what I was doing with people was really powerful. And then learning skills to actually be at cause and responsible for that, right? So that I'm not enmeshed with clients or just an open, porous border or totally shut down, but actually being able to really stay grounded in myself. And this is, I kept asking this question when I was in training, like, but how do I know if this is something that I can coach or if I should refer it out? How do I know? How do I know? Right? Like, what's the right answer? And the training I got over and over again, I actually did a training with Dan Siegel and he said this to me. And I was like, okay, he's got a PhD. He's probably right. The thing he said was pay attention to your own system. Do you feel overwhelmed by what the client is bringing? If you are overwhelmed, if it feels beyond your capacity, then refer it. Can you stay grounded and can you stay regulated? And that is the most important measurement. And that gave me so much trust in myself. And also, oh, okay, let me just do my meditation, do my grounding, all those practices to stay in my own being, in my own body.
See, and without that surrender, some people would pick a difficult client as like, this is the mountaintop. Like, this is the thing I have to overcome. And sometimes it may be like, it may be a referral, maybe the possibility. Yeah, yeah.
And also really getting like, coaching is fundamentally just about being human with each other. Like there's a human connection piece that is nourishing and healing to people inherently, even if the intention isn't to heal. And as such, things will show up in the coaching space that might have to do with therapy, like might not be something like you're not going to go talk to this person about their childhood trauma and try to excavate and heal and release. And like the trauma, and a lot of being trauma informed is like, can this thing show up in the container and just like, I can just like, to your point, the surrender, like, can I allow it to flow? Can I be with this person and stay connected to them through it? And that itself actually can offer a lot of healing.
It doesn't have to be necessarily disempowering. This is just an example because I've been thinking about ability and disability these days. And it was sort of like the glasses one was an example I heard in a speech, which is like everybody has something that they're struggling with. But my disability happens to be very well accommodated for in the modern society. But if circumstances were a little bit different, it could be very traumatic to not be able to see. That's pretty important for survival. If you could not resolve that, that can create a lot of problems. It just so happens this particular gap is very well attended to, but we all have areas where maybe there's just a lack of support. In a different society, this would not even be an issue.
The glasses one, that is such a great example. Wow.
This is by a disability advocate, and she's punchy, but she's funny. So I think that's why somehow it's just like kind of effective in a charming way. But she's like, just because your disability is accommodated for doesn't mean you don't have one. But there are many people where it's not accommodated. But what if you can't see? Which I can't technically. But like I'm sort of saying this because it's almost like in an alternate reality that could be really traumatic. It's just not an issue right now. That is a tangent that came to mind in thinking about this of just like, can we be with that? And could anything be different in being with that? Yeah.
Well, and it's such a great example, Robert, because it's like these things that we're speaking to are things that used to be inherently built into our communities and society. This sort of phenomenon of individualism and a lot of the things we're speaking to are modern phenomenons, and we don't our physiology is actually not built to be that way. It's actually built to be communal. It's built to be relational. That's one of the reasons why resonance is felt and not understood. Like you understand it in your body because it's in your DNA. And it's interesting because it is like lack of resonance, this like disproportionate or kind of unmatching, like what our society is offering versus what we need. And part of our work as coaches is bringing into alignment, like what people actually need, which is to be seen and felt.
Well, yeah, the thing I was thinking about is how vulnerable and sort of freaky resonance really is. So I think we have this experience in the arts all the time, right? So two actors. So resonance is when I both attunement is if I am attuned to your subjective experience, right? I can actually understand, oh, Robert is feeling this way in this moment, and I can pay attention to that. And then resonance is when I actually allow my own internal subjective experience to be changed by your subjective experience. So the example I always think of is, when a client is talking about something and they feel sad, I might actually start to feel tears come up in my own eyes, right? I'm resonating with them. And we know this experience happens in art all the time, right? Two actors on stage, it can become like you're actually communicating subconsciously with each other and starting to really vibe and operate as one unit with each other. In music, right? When you're like really, really in it with somebody. And it is such a high to get to have that experience and so magical, but it is also an intentional, like you are bringing down the boundaries between you, right? You become actually porous and are like giving back and forth, which really to me is a spiritual experience, right? That's the same, like when you feel yourself open up to the world with a lover, right? That can happen.
Exchange.
So I think, this I think comes back to that technique question, really having reverence for that it is hugely vulnerable to actually do that with another person, undefended. It is literally like putting down all of your defensives with someone. When I start to think about, oh, that's what a coaching conversation is, that is pretty wild to think about. It has me really respect both my own work, but then also respect what the client is stepping into with me.
Yeah. I keep thinking your acting or your performance and artistic background it just dovetails right into that.
Totally. It's been really coming back to me lately. Yeah.
Well, it's like I'm, as a pianist, truthfully, I think actors, it's like way more body work. I feel like pianists should be a little more intentional with like, I don't know, workout routines or something, but we're really not often embodied. But actors, it's like body work. Like you are bringing that energy to the stage and then seeing its impact on everyone around you. It's quite something. But we do that in Zoom calls all day long, just kind of affecting each other and noticing that can really make a world of difference in how you respond and like the choices you make after that. So being in your space and being able to practice that with people who were open to it was such a luxury because of the things you were talking about, the individualistic training and conditioning we've had. It brings me to the idea of like collaboration. At least for me, that has been something that I could practice as a way to kind of help support my relationships and open up a little bit more, because it can be difficult, especially when you've been through some stuff, to let that barrier drop, even though you want connection and friendship and relationships, right? Is this something we can have to support collaborating and community?
Enthusiastic, yes. I mean, I think all of the things that we're speaking of, we're talking about it in a coaching context, right? But it's the same skill set with your partner, with your friends, in your community. It also, there's an inherent part of the process, right? Where it's like you notice, because part of the opening up to resonance, right, is like noticing where you resist relationship or notice where you resist that energy flow. Like, where is it pinching off, or what am I having a hard time being with? And like, it requires that level of awareness of like, oh, okay, got it. Can I soften here? If not, what is the support I need? Maybe there's therapeutic support. And that awareness, like you'll start noticing yourself doing it with your friends and your family and like places where you want and desire more intimacy. And it can be really transformative in that regard, like for us as coaches, like in our own lives. And I also have a belief that it's like a leadership superpower that's massively under, like it's not taught. It's not like, my background is in IO psychology. There is not really research on the impact of like this type of resonance in leadership. And it's like, what would it really look like if our leaders, executives, like, fill in the blank, like actually could attune to people and actually be in resonance with people, and take that information in and stay, like, be kind of in their bodies and grounded and not necessarily be taken out by it. Like, oh my God, right? Like, what would the world actually be?
Asking leaders to tune into their body, that's like Twilight Zone. But like, it's obviously very true. It obviously resonates over here, but it's just kind of like thinking of a leader who thinks about that it is a little just so unfamiliar to.
Well, not only is it unfamiliar, I would actually argue it's actually in many spaces intentionally shut down, because the assumption is that if we can feel ourselves and each other, we can't make effective decisions. And actually the opposite is true. It's actually like you are able to fully process all of like use your, I don't remember what the exact number is, but our bodies are processing like something like 9 trillion bits of information at any given time. And only like 100 of it, like of those bits are actually conscious. And like this resonance, it's like it allows you to actually fully process with your whole being everything. You will inherently make better decisions. But for some reason we think like feeling will mean that we're like overtaken and we can't deal, you know? I don't know. I could go on and on.
Or
about
witchy or something.
Yeah.
No, I think it's like, I'm like, yeah, these are like great communication skills. And somebody else is like, it's the Bene Gesserit.
Totally.
And I'm like, I think communication is important, you know?
Yes. But not to, I think, Lauren, people who are afraid of, I'll be overtaken, kind of, they're not wrong, right? It actually requires, you do need to be really grounded in yourself and your own sovereignty at the same time. We tend to do like an either or thing, right? I can either be all the way over there or all the way over here, or I can like work on my skills and resonance, or I can work on connecting to myself. I think they actually go together, right? The more deeply attuned you are to yourself, the more deeply attuned you can be to others. And when I like the actual practices that I do, or that I do with people that I'm training, it's connecting to yourself more deeply. And then you're like, oh my God, I'm so much more connected to the world and other people from this place. But not to undervalue the psychological and spiritual and emotional fitness you need to be able to be with others.
Thank you for saying that. That's really important, because there actually can be, my experience was actually certainly that I became more connected with myself. And when I did, I went, oh my God, there's so much unhealed stuff here. And it was very intense. And like, so having support can be really important. And it's also a consequence of like, after years of numbing and disconnection, there's going to be some stuff that's unaddressed. So it's not wrong. The concern that you're going to be flooded is not necessarily wrong. And it takes reverence and like, and gentleness, and it's important.
Yeah, I feel like this could be controversial given the spiritual context, but I would say like isolation and spiritual development, I would say for now, it can be like really tricky to navigate. I think community, connection, and relationships are great measures for how these things are impacting you and whether they're really serving you. So I certainly think similar to like whole human, like the more you can find community for this, the more steadfast, I guess, you can be in cultivating that. I certainly think, especially after the last few years, it's not that I still think about just disappearing to the mountains one day, but there's something about what we've experienced collectively that's calling for, I think, a little bit of the opposite as far as like spiritual development. Hopefully you can be with people easier. I hope that is a positive consequence of that, you know. Well, thank you. I appreciate both of your time and your insights today. Was there anything else that you wanted to sort of, you don't feel like it has gotten discussed today?
I can't think of anything specific, but just want to, Robert, love you up a bit and just say it was so it was seriously such a gift to have you in the space, and your brilliance, your insight, all of the things that you see, and we're just so appreciative to have been on the podcast today, and that's what feels really top of mind for me.
Thank you.
Yes, and I love hearing that it was a powerful container for you and that there was healing in the container itself. And I think you're right. Healing happens in community with others. It works, right? Like the brain knows how to heal itself. Like community can be an incredibly healing structure. So thanks for creating it the way you did.
Thank you. So you two have a lot going on, both individually and anything else you might be ideating. Is there anything you'd like to say about maybe where they can find you, or things that you're excited about right now?
You can find me at laurenbordencoaching.com. I will give Robert the Whole Human Coaching link for those of you who'd like to check it out. We have not set a launch date yet. We're refining and all that stuff. We're kind of loosely thinking fall, but TBD. But you can get more information there. But that's how you can get in contact with me. I'd love to hear from you. And Katherine, what about you?
KatherineFolk-Sullivan.com is where you can find me. I have a new website going up soon. I'm very excited about that. Lauren and I think, are both very open door connection.
Yeah.
Conversation is how we build everything. So happy to talk.
Yes, if you have a curiosity, please reach out to them about the whole human, but also about them as coaches and artists.
Yes, maybe that'll come back.
I know, I'm going to manifest an Oscar.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for your time today.
Oh, wonderful being with you. Thank you, Robert.
We love you.